Today, I'm going to be telling you the story about Crawford Road, which is supposedly one of the most haunted roads in Virginia and in the country. And I'll be with my lovely co-host here, Glenda. Glenda, say hi. Yeah, like that. You want some tea? No? I'll just run right through you. So Crawford Road is interesting in the fact that there are so many urban legends and rumors around it that pretty much circulate around any road or bridge that is claimed to be haunted. They all kind of have the same stories about them. But it's different in the fact that there are documented tragedies that have happened on that road, and it lies on a very famous battlefield. This road is a notoriously haunted road in the area and in the country. If you're talking about haunted roads throughout the whole US, this one usually comes up. Crawford Road is in Yorktown, Virginia, and it is situated around the Yorktown battlefield, which is where the Revolutionary War was won, and there was like Civil War battlefield. So when you drive down Crawford Road, it's a very pretty stretch of road. It's a country road. It's just forest covered pretty much the whole way. And there's a little overpass, which is where most of the haunted claims are said to take place, where all the activity is, apparently. And that overpass is part of the historic tour road for the Yorktown battlefield. Like many battlefields around the world, it holds that energy from just the pain and suffering of those who died and were injured there, but it also holds the energy of those who got to celebrate victory after such a long and brutal war. You know, why these sort of energies linger in places like this is still definitely a mystery, but I think so many of us have felt something like that in places like that, that there has to be some sort of truth to it. And maybe one day we can actually do a serious investigation into these sort of things, these energies that linger in places of intense human emotion and suffering and things like that. Maybe one day. So around 250 people did lose their lives in the Battle of Yorktown during the Revolutionary War, and there are so many paranormal stories about this battlefield. But we're not talking about that today. The road and the battlefield are situated in what is called the Historic Triangle in Virginia, which is Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown. So we're just going to talk about one little slice of the spooky vortex of this area. So when you think about a typical haunted road bridge story, one that usually comes up is the bride. And there's always a ghostly bride wherever there's a haunted bridge. I don't know why. So the story goes that a young woman was being forced to marry an old crotchety man that she didn't like, and I guess it was back in those days where divorce wouldn't have been an option, and she was pretty much just being forced to marry this guy. So instead of marrying him on the day of the wedding, she ran off and jumped off the bridge and killed herself to not marry this guy. Other versions of the story say that instead of jumping, she hanged herself. So there's two kind of versions of this rumored urban legend story. So the story goes that if you drive up the road on certain nights when the conditions are right, that you will see her hanging body swinging from the bridge, basically. Other stories say that if you're driving down the road, some people have seen the ghostly bride figure just standing under the bridge in the middle of the road in her dress, and when they swerve to go around her, she disappears, but they end up crashing her car, so in turn causing other people harm, which is kind of a typical haunted bride road bridge story that you could find that one in almost any state, honestly. There are also many claims of people experiencing complete car failure on that part of the road. They get to the bridge and all of a sudden their cars will just shut down completely. So that is said to be the cause of many accidents along the road, and there are many accidents along that road. But it's a very dark road. It's a 2-lane road. People like to drive fast going down that road. So I would blame that more on human stupidity than I would on any sort of paranormal activity going on underneath the bridge area. So aside from the bride figure being seen along that part of the road, many people claim to just see shadow figures in general standing in the middle of the road, and maybe that could possibly be from the soldiers who did die in the battlefield right there. Very possible. So people tend to swerve away from the shadow figures and get into wrecks that way. That's another one of the claims of people swerving for entities on the road that are then not there. So when you drive down that part of the road, you can see skid marks and stuff of people who have just tried to stop really quickly underneath that bridge, and that there's car parts littered all around. And if you go to the top and look down, there is just stuff all over the place. Not necessarily car parts. I've seen a whole surfboard down there. Okay, so one of the other big paranormal claims is that if you drive under the bridge and turn your car off at night, that you can hear the voices of angered, dead, enslaved people, and that you can see their bodies swinging underneath the bridge, even though that bridge didn't exist during that time in history that was going on. The bridge was built in the 1930s, which right there will kind of discount a lot of the rumored stories that take place there. The other big urban legend that you'll hear about this bridge, and that you'll hear about every other haunted bridge, is the baby. There's always a crybaby bridge, right? Somewhere in your state, I guarantee there's a crybaby bridge. So this story goes that a frightened mother was running away from the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan. And out of fear and desperation, she ran to this bridge and she threw the baby and herself over the bridge instead of letting herself or her child fall into the hands of evil men. So it said, again, if you go to that bridge at night and turn everything off, that you can hear the crying sound of the baby, or you can hear the crying sound of the mother who had to make that desperate decision. And there are actually rumors of Klan meetings having been done underneath that bridge and having lynched people underneath it, adding to that air of sinister cultism there. I don't know if there is actually any truth to that. It could be, especially because things were kind of covered up back then with that sort of activity. It just took a horrible turn. So there are also stories of an abandoned house that was off into the woods, out of sight of the road, but still kind of visible for people to see and want to go there. So this house was said to not have a door, just windows, and that if you were to peek through the window, that you would see red eyes materialize in a far off dark corner, and that this shadowed entity would just walk right up to that window that you were peeking through. And there's apparently shadow figures that just sort of walk around and haunt the whole area of these woods. So these shadow entities kind of just walk around this house and whisper things, kind of haunt the woods around this area of this house that I don't know exist or not, because again, I can't find any actual documented evidence that it ever did. So those are the rumored hauntings about the road, and it's really for you to decide if you think any of that is true or not, because I've never felt or seen anything out of all the times that I've gone under there. But there is very much documented truth to tragedies that have happened on that road. This road was on America's Most Wanted. That's not the case for most haunted roads. They don't normally get that sort of actual notoriety of sinisterness as being on America's Most Wanted. How did that road end up on America's Most Wanted, you ask? Well, this is a wild story. So, in January 30th, 1990, Mr. James Jimmy Johnson was trying to sell his Mercedes-Benz, and this was the old days, the old faraway days of the 90s, when you would put your car for sale in a newspaper, and then a stranger would call you and you'd go meet the stranger, and well, maybe sometimes you didn't come back, and then you ended up on America's Most Wanted. That's what happened to Jimmy. So Jimmy met with a Mr. J.C. Giles, because that's a real name, I don't know. Johnson met with J.C. Giles at the Omni Hotel in Newport News, which is not very far from Crawford Road. Crawford Road actually goes from Yorktown into Newport News. So the day before he went missing, the two men and Johnson's wife all met at this hotel to talk about selling this car to J.C. Giles. So the three of them, Jimmy, his wife Joyce, and J.C., all went on a little ride in the car so that he could check it out. So then the next day, Johnson went to, I think he was going back to the hotel to actually do the transaction of giving the car to JC, and he never made it home. So on February 6, 1990, a road crew were cutting down trees that had fallen during the snowstorm, and they came across Jimmy Johnson's body. He was just laying off to the side of the road in the woods, kind of covered by the brush, and when they were removing all the fallen down trees from the road is when they found him. Johnson was found with his hands cuffed, his feet bound, and he had been shot once in the chest. The police, you know, when they talked to Joyce, she told them about the guy, J.C. Johnson, how her husband was going to go sell this car to him, and of course they couldn't find evidence of any J.C. Johnson being in that area whatsoever. Jimmy's case went cold after that. In 1993, America's Most Wanted actually did a segment on Jimmy Johnson's case, and like that, tips came rolling in. So it renewed the case, it, you know, kind of brought it back to everyone's attention. And like with most of these things, there's always someone that knows something, and someone did know something. So a tip finally came in that led to the arrest of Juanito Edwards. And he was sentenced to 2 life terms for the murder of Jimmy Johnson. But there's a whole nother wilder backstory to this guy. So here's where the story gets crazy. So there was this woman, Tanya Marsha Lane, who was 20 years old when she disappeared on June 5th, 1989. So like a year before Jimmy went missing and then was found murdered. So she was last seen alive dropping off her son at the babysitter's, which was in downtown Newport News. And she called her mother, who was in New York City, sometime that evening. And that was the last anyone ever heard from her. And her mother said that when they were talking, the phone was abruptly disconnected. Tanya's body was found February 2nd, 1991. So this was after Jimmy was found. And her body was found off Crawford Road. Less than a half mile from the site where Jimmy was found. So unfortunately, this happened to Tanya because of a murder she had witnessed in New York City. She was supposed to testify against Juanito Edwards' brother, who was her boyfriend at the time. So I guess she witnessed her boyfriend murdering someone in a drug-related incident, and she was supposed to testify against him in New York City in front of a grand jury before she disappeared. So even more disturbing, Tanya's mother claims that after Tanya disappeared, that she would get phone calls and the voice on the other end of the phone would say that your daughter's been murdered and her body is in the woods. And I guess this happened a couple times, which is horrifying and terrible. And unfortunately, Juanito Edwards was not convicted of murdering Tanya for lack of evidence. So yeah, that story is wild. That was actually 2 documented murders that happened on Crawford Road. Another really sad incident happened in 1996 when a young Langley airman was found off Crawford Road, and he had been shot to death 8 times. The 2 men who did this were convicted of robbing and murdering this young airman, and they're both serving life sentences. So I guess that's justice was served in that case. And even more tragically and very recently, an 18-year-old kid was shot to death near the bridge part of the road, and it was very, very sad, very horrible. Such a young kid, but the 3 people involved in his murder have all been caught and sentenced and will be spending a very long time in prison. I also did read one account from a Redditor who said that she was doing a little nighttime investigation underneath the bridge part of the road alone. Don't do that, okay? So she stopped her car underneath the bridge, turned it off. She got out of the car and I guess was wandering around, taking pictures, and she started to hear footsteps walking towards her from out of the darkness. Terrifying. So of course she beelines it back into her car. And I guess as she's getting in the door, she heard the footsteps like really coming after her at this point. And she shuts the door, locks the doors, gets in, turns the car on and turns the lights on, and just sees this like wild looking homeless man just like looking at her and like smiling viciously at her. Just that terrifying horror movie scenario that none of us ever wants to happen in real life. Even though she had locked herself in the car, he started to move from the front of the car and tried to get to the driver's side door, I guess, to get to her, and she booked it at that point. And it's really just a lesson in not going out there alone. Like, you just shouldn't go to these places by yourself. You should always let someone know where you're going, especially if you're doing nighttime investigations like that. Like, protect yourself. Make sure people know where you are, because anything can happen. Even though you think that those sort of things will not happen to you, they absolutely can happen to you. So be safe, be careful when you're out there doing these investigations. A local historian and a former deputy sheriff, Mr. Frank Green, so he doesn't believe in any of the paranormal activity that's claimed to go on, but he absolutely would warn people about the actual criminal activity that does happen out on this secluded road. When I read this article that he was interviewed in, what stuck to me about what he said is that if people keep hanging around down there, that they'll end up becoming ghosts. Which is a horrifying thing to say, basically implying that there aren't really any ghosts down there, but there are horrible things that happen down there, and you might not see a ghost, but you might become the ghost. And that is Crawford Road. It's really up to you in your own investigations, if you choose to go down there, to see if there really is any activity. Again, I've never experienced anything down there. I've driven down there so many times in the daytime, at nighttime. I've stopped, I've hang out on top of the bridge, on the bottom of the bridge, and have just never had anything paranormal happen. I've never had anything frightening happen either. That's all just up to everyone's experience. I know people probably have pictures out there of orbs, or maybe they have an EVP or two, but I really couldn't find anything concrete about hauntings happening down there. But again, real life tragedies have happened on that road. Like, always keep it in the back of your mind when you go down there, that this road is on America's Most Wanted. Shit went down. So if you choose to go investigate Crawford Road, just please stick to the 2 golden rules. Don't go alone, and let someone know where you are. Be safe and have happy hauntings in your investigations. I know this is supposed to be a channel about spooky stories, and we kind of delved a little into true crime, which I don't necessarily like getting into, because it, like, that scares me more than actual spooky ghosts or shadow people or anything, because humans are way more terrifying than the dead. So be careful, be safe, and I hope you're having a beautiful night or a beautiful day, or whenever you're watching this. Bye. So I'm going to show you 2 videos. One is Crawford Road during the day, and one is Crawford Road at night, and it kind of gives you a little visual experience of what it's like to drive down the road at both times. doing? A lot of arm movement here.
You need to do that for.
What do you think, Linda? You want to go down, you want to go on a little nighttime drive down Crawford Road?
She says yes.
She says yes. Maybe say a little something, something.
UFOs?
Maybe say a little something, something. UFOs. Ah. Nice. Mm-hmm.
You see UFOs?
What do you think, Linda? She didn't go down that road. What are you doing, assistant? Oh, she was in her relaxed, chill pose. No. Get out of here.
What?
This is my assistant. Isn't he adorable?
Come on, I got a sword and axe on my back and a big
Isn't he adorable? He's a prepared little assistant. He's ready for Crawford Road, right? We're ready to go. What else do you got back? We're ready.
Yeah, I got an axe and a sword on my back.
Ain't nobody gonna get us on Crawford Road.
Yeah.
What is wrong with my hair, you say? This. I did a full undershave a year ago. And this is as much as it's grown back underneath. So I have this short hair under here. And then I have this long hair right here. And sometimes it looks a little silly.